This is not my first time doing a video on the topic of King of the Hill. This one's more of a video about the episode of King of the Hill that introduced me to the very concept of what it means to be gay. However, this time, I'm going to be reminded once again by King of the Hill as to what it means to be queer, gay, trans in the United States right now because of recent events. So I'm sure that you guys know about the recent reboot of King of the Hill for season 14, where they recently revealed the new intro for the next season of King of the Hill, with Bobby Hill being grown up, Peggy Hill looking much older, and of course, so is Hank Hill and all of the rest of the gang. And I'm not gonna lie, as a fan of King of the Hill, this is something I've been hearing rumors about, and for this to be confirmed and definitely having some kind of release date in the future, you can definitely bet that I was eager for this upcoming release of King of the Hill. However, I don't feel like I can be excited for this anymore because of what happened to one of the voice actors. John Redcorn is this Native American character who has a son named Joseph, but the son belongs to Dale and Nancy Gribble due to Nancy's promiscuous relationship between Dale and John Redcorn. Joseph has been pretty much assimilated into the family lifestyle of the Gribbles, while John Redcorn is trying to reconcile with the fact that he's Native American and his offspring belongs to a white man. And there's a lot of episodes, particularly pertaining to John Redcorn, passing on this culture to the next generation. These are not issues I can necessarily speak on particularly, but it is definitely worth highlighting that this is the theme that John Redcorn is written and centered around. So you can imagine with the recent news of John Redcorn's voice actor, Jonathan Joss, to be literally murdered in the name of a fucking hate crime, which the police are still neglecting to classify it as such. You can imagine, yeah, this rings a little too fucking close to home. Jonathan Joss has been receiving lots of death threats from his neighbors, particularly because he's married to a trans man. They're two men, they're in a marriage, they've been getting homophobic threats for years at this point from his homophobic neighbors. His neighbors have threatened to burn down their house for years, to which it finally eventually happened. After the house was burned down, they eventually returned to their house to find that their dog's skull was on the site. They found the dog's harness in a mailbox. And I mean, you can imagine that with any kind of traumatic situation like that, where your house is burned down and your pet is literally murdered, yeah, they started screaming, having a very open reaction, to which the neighbor just started coming back, shot them fucking point blank. So now the voice actor of John Redcorn is fucking dead. Yet all of the media sources that are reporting on what happened, they're failing to call this a hate crime, and the police are handling this case with fucking kitty gloves, even though a clear-ass fucking murder was taking place in the name of a literal hate crime that has been brewing for years. And I genuinely don't think that there is anything in my soul that can now bring myself to ever fucking watch King of the Hill ever again. At least not like the new season. This isn't me saying you should boycott King of the Hill because of what happened to the voice actor of John Redcorn, Jonathan Joss. No, it doesn't feel right now that I know what happened to the voice actor. Not to mention how that voice actor's character has been written to literally be about like settler colonial violence and assimilation and all of these other characteristic traits that go along with it. Really think about it. If you've watched King of the Hill and I told you that the voice actor of John Redcorn died to a hate crime, you would say, wow, that's a little too on the nose. You know what I mean? But anyway, this is a very tragic event, especially a hate crime against a queer couple during Pride Month. And when I first heard about this was told to me by a friend of mine, to which my response was, nothing is sacred. I don't even think that like there's really any separation here between what happened to Jonathan Joss and the new release of King of the Hill. Obviously one didn't cause the other. In my mind, the two are too inextricably linked to each other. Even thinking about being remotely excited for the new season, it feels icky to me. There's also just the issue of having to replace Jonathan Joss. What will that be like? If you have to replace Jonathan Joss, like, doesn't that also seem a little icky as well? Think about how alien it feels for somebody other than Brittany Murphy to be performing Luann, or how alien it feels that somebody else is performing Frankie other than Kazuki Yao. Or another example, when the band Alice in Chains made a comeback but didn't have their original singer Stanley Lane, who passed away, performing their hits. This is to say that even if new faces can and very well have performed these roles really well, it is to say that nothing can really beat the original, simply because the original is what we're all familiar with, because we're acquainted to their voices. This is what we know them by. This is what we know their sound goes by. And it's not just that a queer couple were attacked on the first day of Pride Month. It's also that a Native American man was killed on the first day of Pride Month. All of the settler colonial violence that Native American people have been suffering since the birth of the U.S. Empire, yeah, it hasn't stopped. It's still here. What you see in Palestine, that's going to start happening here. This is just the first step of that. And as you can see, being like a whole ass celebrity or a famous voice actor doesn't give you immunity to hate crimes. I mean, look at what happened to Elliot Page. Elliot Page, although he's much more on the receiving end of privilege, and he's definitely seeing much more acceptance and celebration for him coming out, he still is on the receiving end of so much backlash and hate campaigns and bigoted campaigns from gender-critical fuckwads and TERFs and the likes of Jordan B. Peterson. And keep in mind that Elliot Page is more high-profile than Jonathan Joss was. Elliot Page is still definitely, like, in harm's way, given that he's trans, but he's still alive. And the fact that there's so little reporting on this, especially in the context that what happened to Jonathan Joss is a hate crime, that in and of itself is treasonous to mankind. I would even go as far as to say that the journalists who are not reporting this incident as a hate crime are performing malpractice. They're complicit in the silencing of violence against queer people. I want to read the statement that was written by his husband, Tristan Curran de Gonzalez. This is his statement. He is the husband, now widow, of Jonathan Joss. My husband, Jonathan Joss, and I were involved in a shooting while checking the mail at the site of our former home. That home was burned down after over 2 years of threats from people in the area who repeatedly told us they would set it on fire. We reported these threats to law enforcement multiple times and nothing was done. Throughout that time, we were harassed regularly by individuals who made it clear they did not accept our relationship. Much of the harassment was openly homophobic. When we returned to the site to check our mail, we discovered the skull of one of our dogs and its harness placed in clear view. It caused both of us severe emotional distress. We began yelling and crying in response to the pain of what we saw. While we were doing this, a man approached us. He started yelling violent homophobic slurs at us. He then raised a gun from his lap and fired. Jonathan and I had no weapons. We were not threatening anyone. We were grieving. We were standing side by side. When the man fired, Jonathan pushed me out of the way. He saved my life. Jonathan is my husband. He gave me more love in our time together than most people ever get. We were newlyweds. We picked Valentine's Day. We were in the process of looking for a trailer and planning our future. He was murdered by someone who could not stand the sight of two men loving each other. I was with him when he passed. I told him how much he was loved. To everyone who supported him, his fans, his friends, know that he valued you deeply. He saw you as family. My focus now is on protecting Jonathan's legacy and honoring the life we built together. If your concern is how someone coped with trauma or how loudly we speak when recounting injustice and being ignored by authorities, then you never truly cared about my husband. Jonathan saved my life. I will carry that forward. I will protect what he built. Sigfredo Alvarez Chija is the person who is now the suspect of this crime. This is the face of somebody who destroyed an entire family. Think about the nationalist propaganda about family values and American families and strong families, all under the guise of Make America Great Again. Is this what putting families together looks like? Where you burn their house down, you skin their dog, and you shoot the husband? Yeah, that, my friend, is not what putting families together looks like. That is family destruction, and this highly homophobic and highly racist American nationalist intoxication is only prime to perpetuate the destruction of family. Another thing to consider is that in the state of Texas, HB 3399 recently passed, which makes it quite illegal to be transgender. Along with President Donald Trump defining gender to be one man and one woman, and based on the sex that they were assigned with at birth, is it truly any surprise that the police never responded to this couple's pleas for help? Is it really any surprise that the police do not consider what happened to Jonathan Joss and their home and their dog and their family to be a hate crime to begin with? Because even if the suspect is arrested and given life in prison or whatever, the truth of the matter is that it needs to be recognized as a hate crime. That what happened to these people happened because that they were in a relationship that the people in that neighborhood did not approve of. And that the hateful legislation that only reinforces that kind of violence to begin with only further accelerated this inevitable conclusion. So it's important to recognize it as a hate crime, nothing short of it. On a final note, I want to say one thing, and that is to always make sure that if you hear about these horrible things that go on to queer and trans people, especially in the age of Trump and the rise of fascism and the decline of capitalism that is spiraling into this fascist hellscape, always make sure that you don't let these horrible things get to you. Don't let them drown you into the pool of doom. Instead, to always make sure that you let these horrible moments radicalize you. Internalize the empathy that make you feel this amount of rage. Because having these feelings of rage is evidence that you're human, that you have the ability to express compassion for others, to not get desensitized, to not get, jaded by all of these horrible things. We, as people who are still here today, need to fight for a future where we don't have to be afraid of just merely going outside, where we don't have to constantly be bombarded with threats of arson and getting our pets murdered and getting us murdered by our neighbors. That is a future worth fighting for. And even though it may seem hopeless, it's still a future worth fighting for, even now, even when things do seem hopeless. After all, giving up right now would leave all of the people, including Jonathan Joss's, death in vain. Don't leave their death in vain. Fight for the future that they would want to live in, that you would want to live in, that you want our future generations to live in a world where we're not having to be constantly afraid of being killed just because we're queer, because we're trans. That's what Pride's all about. That's the meaning of Pride. Fuck this rainbow capitalism bullshit. With the same corporation that's selling you like all of these rainbow merchandise are also willing to lobby against your basic human rights and support Project 2025. Pride was a riot. Pride is a riot. Pride will always be a riot. Always continue to fight for that future, and don't let anybody's death be in vain. I'll put a link in the description to the GoFundMe if you want to support the widowed husband of the late Jonathan Joss. Rest in power, Jonathan Joss, and I appreciate all of your voice acting work. John Redcorn's a very special character to me in King of the Hill, and he wouldn't have been the character that I would have grown to love in my childhood without you. Thank you. Solidarity forever, and you will never be forgotten.